welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing the good old-fashioned tier list. Before we get started with this video, make sure you check out the Patreon. We're going to have specific content going there in the future. Obviously, it's going to be a little slow running at first, but we have gaming and Christian. Appreciate the member. But other than that, that's pretty much the Patreon, where I'll be uploading usually different content or early content. It really depends on if it's guides, it's going to be early, and some specific, because obviously there's so many different builds. So if you're looking for guides and stuff that's not on YouTube, it's probably going to be on the Patreon. But in this tier list, since a lot of people misdo what I put, so I have an A plus tier, and then we have an A tier, which means I should have done this a long time ago, because people thought just because I put something at the the bottom of A, they were saying that it was the equivalent of the classes in A. That's not what I was saying. Obviously, you'd have to actually watch the video and hear the specific part where I say that. But now we kind of just can clear the air here. This is going to be for 3v3 arena. Now, people also said something about blood DKs. I usually don't put tanks up there because, let's be honest, they're viable in a sense that they're okay. They're playable. Sure, you might face them you face one team that's playing it, and that's it. So you could say anything's broken at that point. But I'll rate Blood DK, but I'm not gonna do any other tanks. I think every other tank spec is good in twos, but that's about it. So put that in the air, and now we're going to start. So first off is going to be the easiest one, BM S tier, the best spec in the entire game. It makes other classes look like a joke. Like, for example, I hear a lot of people say Warlock isn't that good. Affliction Warlock is an S tier spec. The problem is Hunter is such a godly spec right now. It literally just, if you don't have a BM Hunter on your team and you're facing a BM Hunter, you're probably gonna lose, or you're gonna have a really good chance of losing. That's pretty much just how it is. But the next one we're gonna be going is gonna be MM Hunter. It's going to be A tier. So it's still viable. It's not very good, but it's viable in the sense, you can play with the Pharaoh Druid, and you can make this work. Obviously, is it going to be godly? No. And BM's obviously going to be the better option, but it still is viable. It has its place. And that's pretty much it. And then we have Survival Hunter, which honestly, I would say right now it's better than MM. And just because it has a pretty good amount of burst damage, and I think is just overall better than MM. I think MM's burst is mediocre, and at least Survival Hunter, you're getting a little bit more damage consistently. But even so, they're both like A tier, not A plus. They're viable in a sense. That's about it. Next spec that we're going to be going over is going to be Shaman. So Wrestle Shaman is where is it? Let me find it. Where is you at? Oh, here it is. So Wrestle Shaman is gonna be A plus tier. It's gonna be one of your better healers that I honestly play against it a lot. I'd say HPAL I play against it the most, and then it's probably Wrestle Shaman right behind that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily OP or anything. I just think it's really good into the current meta. So still viable. You're still going to see a lot of these guys, but that's pretty much all there is to it. It's not going to be HPAL level or Disc Priest level or even Preds Evoker, but it is still viable, and it's actually pretty good. We have Elemental Shaman, which is also going to be A plus tier. Right now it does insane burst. Its consistency might not be the best, but when it does burst, it's hitting like 2.3 million Urshocks, and it does a ton of damage. Like every time I face a Elemental Shaman, every time they burst, it's literally the most unhealable damage, and it's not just on one person, it's on your entire team. So Elemental Shaman is really good. Obviously, it's going to get overshadowed by BM, but I face a good amount of Ellie's. And we're just going to put that right here. Put the healers on the left, put the DPS on the right. And then we have Enhancement Shaman, which is honestly viable in the sense that it's A tier. So I'd say it has a chance to be lower A plus tier, but due to the fact that I'm trying to put certain specs in A plus, enhancement's definitely probably the best one in A tier, like this list right here. It does insane burst damage. You know, enhancement warrior, enhancement windwalker, enhancement ret, enhancement rogue. You see enhancement with everything pretty much, every melee. They do a ton of burst, and they're actually pretty good right now. Obviously, in this current meta, it's more so about consistency than burst. So, you know, it's going to get overshadowed by other specs. It's going to have insane burst. It's kind of like a sub rogue, except, you know, sub rogue has good CC and no damage. Enhance has a ton of damage and really only has Hex, which usually gets dispelled by every other meta class. So, next one that we have is going to be Mage. Frost Mage right now, I would say it's A plus tier behind Elemental Shaman. You have really good burst, but it's not as strong as like an Ellie. Ellie is a non-castable spec. You don't have to cast, which means if you're getting targeted, you're able to do things. As a Frost Mage, if you get trained, you're not doing anything. On top of that, BMs completely counter mages. So you can probably know what's going to happen if a mage faces a hunter. Usually the hunter is going to absolutely just destroy the mage. However, mage still does a ton of burst. Obviously off its burst it's not that good, but on its burst it's like an elemental shaman. It does a ton of burst and it can be super viable. You'll see a good amount of these guys. Same thing with Ellies. Fire Mage is going to be C tier. Really, the one of the two only specs that I'm going to put at C tier. Its burst is mediocre. They changed it into an AoE spec. I think I already talked about this so many times. They ruined the spec entirely. The last time Fire Mage was viable was in Shadowlands, other than the AoE build that they tried doing, because they're too lazy to do it in PvP. So they do stuff for PvE and they change the entire spec. So Fire Mage, unfortunately, I've never faced a Fire Mage in the last like 3 expansions. And when I did face someone, it was just some AoE cringe build. I was playing like with an Affliction Warlock, like a Ignite build or something. And then we have Arcane, which is going to be also A plus. They do a ton of damage, and honestly, I didn't think they were good until I actually faced a few. And then I was like, okay, well, this spec might be insane. Now, I wouldn't say it's like anywhere near S. I'd say its burst is insane, but off its burst, it's not that good. So it's kind of like it's only A plus tier because of the CC that it adds onto it, and then obviously its burst. But I think Frost Mage is still better overall. You're getting 2 blocks, your survivability is just better, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So it's still A plus tier. It's still really good, viable. You may not see a lot of these guys, but because obviously Arcane is just a high end spec, it's kind of like Sub Rogue. It's like the harder spec to play. Same thing like with Fire Mage. People who play Fire and Arcane, especially when it's not in the meta, are usually pretty insane at the spec because you just have to be. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Next one we have Evoker, which I have personally faced. And if I had to put it somewhere, the only reason I'd put it in front of Frost Mage is because it just does damage 24/7. I've never seen a spec click one singular ability and do like 900k a second. I have a video of my HPAL games at like 1950, which will be up on the Patreon. It's actually disgusting. I'd say it's one of the better casters for actual burst and consistent. And the only reason it's not better than an Ellie is because it actually has to cast. It has to cast that one ability, and it can be kicked. However, you're getting a ton of CC. You're getting time stop, which is the most annoying ability of all time. I don't know if you guys know what time stop is. It's a PvP talent they run that basically stops time for 5 or 6. It's basically a bubble, but they can't move. It's the most annoying broken cooldown of all time. But I'd say honestly, right now Evoker is just better. I think Frost Mage requires you a lot of setup for your burst. Evoker is your 3-button rotation burst into a one ability channel. That's it. That's all you do for the rest of the game. You do one ability and instant cast. That is all. But it is god tier. Next spec that we're going to be going over is going to be All, which is going to be at this point better than Fire Mage, but still absolutely positively trash. It's going to be very bad. Not going to be nice to play either of these specs. Anytime I see any of these specs, I think to myself, why would you do this to yourself? It's just pointless. Don't do it. Don't log on these specs. If you do, I'm going to have to root you down. Or root you out is what the phrase is. Next, we're going to have is Evoker, which honestly, if I have yet to see any of these guys. I've seen like one. I'm going to put it in A plus tier now. I think H-Pals are just so much stronger than every other healer. Like, unfortunately, the one time H-Pal viable, they make it absolutely broken. I just don't get it. I don't get why they do that. They purposely ruin specs like Sub-Rogue, H-Pals, Fire Mages, MM Hunters, Enhancement Shamans, all the specs that require burst, Windwalkers, they just make them broken for like a week, and then they absolutely nerf them. Feral Druid's been broken for 7 or 8 weeks. Same thing with BM Hunter. How does it take this long for them to nerf them when other specs get nerfed and absolutely butchered in less than a day or two? Like, you can tell there's just a ton of favoritism. Or favoritism. I think I said that, but that's pretty much that. So I think it's better than Wrestle Shaman, but I don't think any healer in the game right now competes with H-Files, unfortunately. Next spec that we're going to be going over is going to be Warrior. Warrior right now, Fury Warrior is actually, I'd say Arms and Fury are really good. It's kind of hard to put these somewhere only due to the fact that they're broken because they play with certain specs. In 2v2 Arena, yeah, they're still broken. So by no means is this not an S tier spec right now. Fury Warrior and Arms, I'd say Arms is only not as broken because it requires burst to do something. Fury Warrior just feels like you're consistently taking the absolute unhealable damage 24/7. There's a reason you see 10 times the Warriors and Hunters than any other spec in the entire game. So people think Fury Warrior is not good. I'm telling you, it is a S tier spec. Obviously, I'd say it's towards the lower end, so it's more towards here, like somewhere over here. But due to the fact that it pairs up with one of the best specs in the game, which is one of the best comps in the game, Fury Warrior BM and Feral Druid BM are the #1 specs that you can be playing right now. So I refuse to put it down with these other specs because at least they take skill, and you can tell that you have to do something. As these specs, you literally just you click your 2-button macro and you smash and pound. And then we have Arms Warrior, which if I had to put, I think Arms Warrior is in a good spot. I think it does a ton of burst. I think they kind of ruined the spec because they made it burst reliant. Arms Warrior should never be a burst reliant spec. Because they changed it a long time ago. Like in Cataclysm, it used to be a burst reliant spec, but then they tried to make it into like some Shadowlands consistency one shot. They kept trying to just make it an AoE spec and a one shot spec, and this is pretty much just how it is. I would say right now, it's probably right here. I think Arms Warrior, again, the only reason I don't think it's better than Frost Mage is because I never see an Arms Warrior, and when you do, at least they're manageable in the sense that they do a ton of burst. But if you just click, it's like a sub rogue. If you just click your your abilities, you're fine. Like, let's be honest, I've never died to Arms Warrior without them having every ability up. It's literally a sub rogue with MS. That's it. I don't care what any of you say. There's no way Arms competes with the Fury Warrior. Now, maybe if they're facing each other, it's different because obviously Arms is better in the sense of just CDs wise. So yes, if there were 1-1, if you were to 2v2, an Arms Warrior should win. But overall, as a spec, Fury Warrior is just better. You see 10 times the Fury Warriors than you do Arms, and that is a fact. You can look that up. But that's pretty much that. Next spec that we're going to be going over is going to be DK. A lot of people get really salty with DKs. I think DKs are insane. Obviously, they're not insane in the sense of they're not like Fury or BM or even Ellie or Evoker level broken, like to where they do a ton of bursts. They do like at least 800k a second, but they're a bleed reliant spec. Again, they changed this spec as well. DKs used to be a bleed reliant spec in Cataclysm, and a long time ago. And they in Cataclysm they're insane. They just put your bleeds up, you put your gargle, and you kill everything. It's not like that right now. You have to click like 9 abilities, and then they all together just do burst damage. The problem is after your burst damage, you don't do much damage. So that is why I would say it's behind Arms Warrior, but still in the list of A plus tier. I still see a ton of unholy DKs. Obviously, they're viable in the sense of 3v3 arena. Keep this in mind. In 2v2 with arena, they're gonna get absolutely destroyed by obviously BM and warriors. That's a pretty much an obvious. So if you're playing this in 2v2s, this is why you lose, because warrior will counter DK. That's been known for a long time now. But in 3v3 arena, there's a bunch of DK comps that you can play. DK Rogue, DK DH, DK Warrior, DK BM Hunter. I think that's one of the top ones. BM and anything with a BM Hunter, really. But I still think it's viable, and it's not it might not be God tier, but it is viable. And I think it's actually not bad. Next spec is going to be Frost DK, which I would have to put right behind Enhancement Shaman. These can be argued, obviously. I think they're in the same category. They're viable. Again, anything in just A tier is viable, but not as good as A plus tier. So keep that in mind. And honestly, you could argue that Arcane Mage is A tier, which might be better, to be honest. And honestly, if I had to say so, I'd say it's actually like it's good burst wise, but maybe this looks better. It's kind of hard to put specs in a certain spot. I think this might look better for the. Okay, I think this looks a little bit better. You guys can let me know what you guys think. Next spec is gonna be Blood DK, which right now currently, if I had to put Blood DK somewhere, and this is just a absolute troll of a spec, it would probably be in front of MM Hunter. I think MM Hunter is the worst spec of all time, right? It's one of the worst. I'd say it's so close to being down here. I've never faced one. However, I know their burst still does damage. It's just off their burst, they're useless. So that's the only reason that they're still A tier. Like, they're still in that category of viable. And especially in 3v3 arena, where you can play with the Feral Druid, you can play with something that's S tier and make it good. Any class with an S tier spec will make it, higher up in the list. But, you guys can let me know what you guys think about that. Next spec we're going to be going over is going to be Druid. Feral Druid, right now currently, I'd say it's probably above Fury Warrior, but behind BM. Again, I think BM's the best spec in the game. That's pretty much an obvious. If you look at the ladder, you will see 90% of the bracket went to BM Hunter or Feral Druid, or maybe like these are the top 3 specs in the game right now. Like, you see one of these every other game. I even literally went from Rogue to Feral Druid. Everybody did. Because why wouldn't you play the new Rogue? Obviously, I still play Rogue, but you get what I'm saying. Next spec is going to be Rusted Druid, which is going to be absolutely garbo. I think the one problem is purging, and then obviously the amount of damage they take is absolutely horrendous. If you face a Rusted Druid, just go them every stun that you have, and you'll kill them. Especially if you're playing like a good spec, you'll just burst them and kill them. Every one of these specs almost can purge, and purging does not go well with the Rusted Druids, because the moment their hots are off, it takes a lot of mana just to get them all back up, just to get purged again. So I think Rusted Druid is still terrible. I haven't seen I've seen like one with a caster cleave, but otherwise you just don't, they're non-existent. So that's pretty much it. Next we have Boomy, which is actually going to be semi-decent. If I had to put Boomy in somewhere in this list, it would probably be here. So I think Boomy, it does really good burst damage, and you could argue that it's probably better than Arms Warrior. The problem with Boomy is the problem with certain classes is right now you can't judge what is like the best out of the best when it's comparing it to a BM Hunter. The problem is every one of these classes here that face a BM Hunter, especially if it's a geared BM Hunter with like an S tier spec, like Feral Druid BM, Fury Warrior BM, if these guys go on to this guy, it's going to feel like the Boomy's class sucks, because he can't move he can't come out of bear form. But that's not because his class is bad, it's just because this guy's class is just so much better. So, that's pretty much that. Boomy has CC, it has damage, it has pretty much everything it could want other than a defensive cooldown. Skin is not a defensive cooldown. I can't say it enough. The fact that Boomies have yet to get survival instincts is mind-blowing. It's the one spec that I've played that doesn't have a defensive cooldown. It just doesn't. Skin's not a cooldown. I've died through Skin like from 100 to 0 every single time. It's not a CD. I'm telling you. But that's pretty much that. It's still viable. Still does really good CC damage and pretty much everything else. It's basically like a Pharaoh Druid just with more burst than you know original damage. Like it doesn't do much damage off its burst, but on its burst, it's unhealable damage. So that's pretty much that. Next one is going to be Monk. Windwalker is actually not terrible in the sense that it's viable in the sense that it does enough. I'd say it's right here. Actually, no, maybe it's kind of, again, it's hard to get these three because you could argue that one's better than other. But I think Windwalker is viable in the sense that actually I think Windwalker is not viable in threes right now. To be honest, I think Enhance is actually more viable than Windwalker. That's how good good burst Enhance is right now. And then DK just has a little. It has consistent like pressure, even if it's not the greatest, and it goes well into certain comps. So honestly, this is probably better. Who knows? Next spec is going to be Mistweaver, which honestly, surprisingly, after the buff, which honestly wasn't even that crazy, made them viable. I'd say they're better than WrestleSham due to the fact that they have port every 30 seconds or whatever, and then their orb. Obviously, having their orb, especially in 3v3 arena where it doesn't damp, is a game changer for them. Again, if they did the same thing they did with H-Files land hands with Mistweaver orb, I guarantee Mistweaver would skyrocket to an S tier spec. That's how easy it could be an S tier spec. If it had a better defensive cooldown other than orb getting absolutely GG'd on dampening, it would be an S tier spec. That's how close it is. But since it's, it has port and stun, it's probably going to be better than Rest of Shaman, and then Rest of Shaman is going to be viable because it just goes well into with certain comps. But that's pretty much that. Next one is going to be Warlock. A lot of people think Warlock is bad, and I'm here to tell you you are wrong. Obviously, it's not S tier good. There's only a few S tier specs. However, it's still going to be pretty high in the list, ladies and gentlemen. I would say it's probably, if I had to think about everything all put together, I would say it's right here. I'd say Affliction Warlock in 3v3 Arena. Obviously, it all depends on the Warlock and what you're queuing. But if you're queuing your meta comp, whether it's SP, Affliction Warlock, Affliction Warlock Assassination Rogue, Affliction Warlock Pharaoh Druid, Warrior, any S tier spec, Affliction Warlock, you can literally play anything with a lock. It's gonna be high A. It's still insane. Their burst is insane. Their damage, once they get 3 bleeds rolling, the game's over. The Warlock wins. Because you can't heal or dispel, and if you do dispel, they literally take 80% of your HP, even if you pre-wall it, which I do almost every time. Now, however, if you face a really good HPL, which you'll see in my next, anybody who's watching the Patreon, you'll see that dispelling at certain times that they don't have UA up, or whatever it's called, UI, I think it's UA, but it basically absolutely trolls Affliction Warlocks. If they don't put UA up, or I think I'm saying it right, and you're able to just dispel for free, that's when Warlock is bad. A bad Warlock, you don't want to play Warlock. Warlock, you still have to have some type of brain. You got to be able to know how to port, and you got to know how to put bleeds up. So that's pretty much it. Next is going to be Demo Warlock, which is going to be, honestly, right now, I would say it's probably. Mm, it's kind of hard to put this somewhere because it's a stun reliant spec. It's kind of like a sub rogue. The problem with them is I don't think their damage is enough to like. You got to be playing some real dampener. And the only reason I'm going to put it at the head of A list right now is because it does well with casters. I think the spec by itself isn't even that good, but it is a dampener, and that's just how it always is. So I think just because just because of that fact, it's gonna be probably not terrible, but I mean all the A are viable, but in general they're like, come on now. And then we have Destro Warlock, which the problem with Destro Warlock has been the same thing for years. you actually have to cast any casting in this type of meta. You got to go through 3 stuns, 5 kicks, 9 incaps, 5 knocks. You're gonna get grip 15 times. You're gonna get DC'd, come back in, MC'd, and it's over. So it's gonna be terrible. I'd say Destro Warlock in the sense of that, just because it has to cast in this meta, would probably be literally here. I'd say it's terrible. Now it is good if you're really good at fake casting. So if you get in perfect setups and you're really good, it's gonna be really high. Like it can easily be behind Boomy because it does insane burst. It's just impossible to get off without having literally consistent precog, and that's just a bad class design. So I'd say honestly, I see any of these other specs 10 times more than I've seen a Destro Warlock almost ever. And the only reason they're in front of Windwalker is because they have consistent burst and they have CC. Windwalkers don't have CC, and honestly, you could say this. Boom. That looks a little bit better, I think. And honestly, I think Windwalkers. And no, I'd say Windwalkers still. Mm, it's again, they're all kind of similar. This means they're all similar, so it doesn't even matter where I put these. They're all. It doesn't matter which one's in front. They're all in the same category. It doesn't matter. It means they're close to each other. So that's pretty much all there is to it. And then next one we're going to be going over is going to be DH. Again, still viable, and I'd say honestly, it's probably the best on the list, like ahead of Demo Warlock. It does damage. I don't think it does enough consistent damage to be anywhere near A plus tier or like in the sense of A plus tier, but it's still really good. Like it still does damage. It's kind of like where DK is. It does a good amount of burst damage, but then off its burst it's kind of well, what's the damn? They made your class into a consistent damage, and then they end up butchering your class and making it into a burst. It's just they just don't know what's happening. So that's pretty much that. So again, all these specs here are viable in a sense. That doesn't mean that they're just all close to each other. They're all viable. They all can be playable, but they're not A plus tier. That's all that means. It means they're close. So same thing with up here. All these together are close to each other. Same thing with Fury. Obviously, BM is probably up in the next list, but that's pretty much that. So next one is going to be, let's go with Priest. Holy Priest is going to be terrible. Again, they don't have any defensive cooldowns. They might have really good healing, but what's healing when you don't have a defensive cooldown? You don't got PS. You don't got Dome. I think you have Light Swap. I think. But, who knows, honestly. Overall, you're not going to see any Holy Priest, and if you do, it's probably some cringe, Caster Cleaver or something. Next one is going to be Disc Priest, which again, I don't think any healer other than H-Bow is S, but if I had to put Disc Priest somewhere right now currently, honestly, you could even say this, to be honest. It's, again, they're all similar. Like, I don't really see Evoker enough to actually say it's better than anything, because, they just die, like, because you have to play on top of your team, which ends up being really bad for you, because obviously in this type of meta, if you get caught out in the open, you're dead in like 3 globals. So they're all similar. I don't really know like which one for certain is, better or worse. They're all just close. They're all just semi good. Like they're A plus here. They're viable, but obviously H-Pal is going to be there. So right now, H-Pal is the #1 healer in the game by far. It has a ton of healing, a ton of utility. With everyone lacks something. H-Pals don't. Like for example, Disc Priest, they don't do any healing. Like their healing is bad, but they have a ton of utility. Evoker, they have a good amount of healing and an okay amount of utility. Mistweavers have a good amount of healing and they have an okay amount of utility. The only difference is H-Pal has unhealable burst healing and it has a ton of utility. And it works well with so many other comps because you have so much to go through. And that's pretty much why that's going to be, the better healer. Next one is going to be Ret Paladin. So Ret Paladin, again, it was meant to be low, but I actually, once I uploaded the video, or not even, once it was like already done, I was like, bro, because like sometimes you just think later on, you're like, oh, I wish I put it in this spot. I wish I put Rhett in a different spot because I think it's really good. It does a ton of burst and it has a ton of utility. But at the end of the day, if we're being legit, if I had to put this somewhere, it would be here. Again, the problem with Ret Paladins. Actually, if I had to put Ret somewhere, it'd probably be here. Actually, just because Arms Warriors just it has like just overall better. I think Rets are good, but they suck off their burst. Same thing with kind of like Warrior. They're both just similar to each other. But yeah, Ret it basically has everything you would want. Obviously, its consistency isn't the greatest, but its damage, as long as you're not just focusing on playing defensive and you're actually able to like play the game, you're going to be able to keep up with damage. I played with a few in 2v2 arena, and I've also seen a bunch in 3v3 arena. They're definitely viable, and they're semi good. They're A plus tiers, so they're viable. They're okay. They're not too bad at all. They're still good. You're alright. Next one is going to be Prot, which again is a troll spec, but just for the jokes, I'm just gonna put it here. Actually, I'm not even gonna put it here. I'm gonna put it here. And honestly, Fire Mage and Aug are so bad. I'm gonna do that. Actually, you know what? We might as well say Prot is better than Holy Priest because at least Prot Paladin does healing, and you have defensive. It may not be the greatest, but hey, Holy Priest is that bad. Nah, I'm just playing. Holy Priest is definitely better than Prot. The next one is going to be Shadow Priest, which over the time, it's actually really good. Um, Again, if I had to put this somewhere, obviously Affliction Warlock, SP with really anything, SP Feral Druid, SP Fury Warrior, anything with an SP really. I would say it's probably a little bit. Mm, I think this looks better in. Well, it's kind of hard to put this somewhere to be honest. It's just like such an iffy class. I think it's honestly better just because of your utility. Obviously, you're getting a lot of stuff to stop CC. You're getting a ton of CC, and obviously you have the consistency to keep up. On top of that, you're going to work a lot better with other specs. Again, I just named out a few. That's just a few. There's Assassination Rogue SP. There's just so much stuff that you can play, and it'll make it a great spec. Obviously, its burst isn't as insane as the others, but altogether, I think its utility and everything for the team, just like Ret Paladin, it makes it up in this list. And it's actually not bad. I faced a lot of Shadow Priests. And now we have Rogue, the one you've all been waiting for. Some of you guys might get mad at this. So we're going to find out. First, we'll start off with the worst spec, Outlaw. It's viable in a sense, but let's be honest, it's a dampener. It's kind of like Demon Warlock, just without any damage. It's literally just dampener. I would say, due to the fact that it has CC, it's probably going to be in front of our. No, I'd probably say right here. I'd say not. I'd say Arcane is only better because it has actual damage, and Outlaw again is a literal dampener. I'm not saying that Outlaw is necessarily better than anything. However, just due to the fact it's still viable in a sense. Honestly, personally, I've never faced one. I've been watching people's streams constantly when I play. I've yet to see anybody play one. Sure, in solo shuffle they can work, but again, you don't see this. You just don't see them. So that's just that. I still think they're better than Windwalker just because obviously it has CC and like Boomy Rogue and stuff like that can work. And then we have Assassination Rogue, which is actually going to be semi good right now. If I had to put Assass, it would be here. So it would be better than Ret Paladin, better than Boomy, behind Arms Warrior. I think Arms Warrior's overall burst is actually pretty insane. They have like a one-shot ability. It's like diminish, and it's like a two. It's like a stomping. I don't know what the ability is, but they basically cast it to channel, and it literally go. You can do a ton of damage with it. I've been like 100 out almost several times from it. Obviously, as long as you just click on it, you're pretty much good. But they do a ton of damage on their burst. And the only reason Assassination is probably not better is due to the fact that its burst damage is pretty good. And its AoE dam, I'd say it's honestly it's kind of hard again. They're all similar. You could say it's better, you could say it's worse. I think Arms Warrior is just a little bit better, just because of its excessive burst damage. But that's pretty much it. And then we have Sub Rogue, ladies and gentlemen, the one we've all been waiting for. Now I'm gonna give this a legit spot, somewhere I think it deserves to go. So I faced two Sub Rogues. Obviously, it was the same ones at like 1950. They were playing RMP because obviously Frost Mage, H-Foul, Sub Rogue is viable in a sense. Obviously, it's not the best, but its burst is good enough to where it deserves to be A plus tier, obviously. And if I had to put it somewhere, it would probably be in a legit spot. If I had to put it somewhere, behind Assassination, in front of Ret Paladin. I think Ret Paladin, again, the only reason I think that it's worse than the other specs is because it doesn't have consistency. And it does get, you get Hodge, you get Blind, or you get Rep, and that's great. And you got a bunch of utility. But what's utility when you're taking unhealable damage the entire game? Sub Rogue, it doesn't do damage. And sure, it might do damage on blades, but obviously that's why you just click CDs on blades and you're good. And 3v3 though, it still has its purpose. You can play Sub Rogue. Usually you're gonna see Mage sub or like maybe like SP sub, stuff like that. You could even say BM or Evoker sub. But the only reason sub's even viable in the first place is again, it's CC. That's it. It's just a CC bot. But that allows it to get the spot that it deserves. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Again, tonight or later there will be a Patreon HPAL video, so make sure you check that out if you can. There's a 7-day free trial, so get on in while you can. But otherwise, hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Obviously, hopefully, let me know if this was a little bit better in terms of you guys actually understanding the difference between A plus tier, because I should have done this a long time ago, but I always thought that people understood what I was trying to put. But obviously, you guys can let me know what you guys think. Obviously, the only one that I could argue with right now is Fury Warrior, and obviously you could say it's down here. The only reason I'm saying it's S tier is it's excessive damage. And obviously it pairs well with Hunter. Like, that's all I see. I see Pharaoh Dude Hunter and Fury Warrior Hunter. And then occasionally you see Affliction Warlock, Ellie, Dev, and these A plus tier. Otherwise, you rarely see anything else. But let me know what you guys think. Obviously, you guys have your own opinion, so make sure you comment down below what you guys think. And that'll be it. It's Ben X, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace, peace.